Okay. Let's pivot and talk oxidative stressors for a minute. Okay, we see everyone on Instagram jumping in cold tubs these days, right? Because it's the cool thing to do.
Is that true?
Is it the cool thing to do, or is it true on Instagram?
I was just thinking about it today. I spend a total of like 1 minute a week on Twitter, probably 5 minutes a day on Instagram. But the thing that I have to be mindful of is YouTube. Like, YouTube is far more interesting.
Yeah.
Like, you can actually learn stuff on YouTube. Like, I get drawn into car porn all day long. Like, I can't stop watching, videos of like how this engine works and this race that I missed 27 years ago and stuff like that. But yeah, I can't really relate to surfing Instagram. I find it so uninteresting.
We call it doom scrolling. It brings you no value to your life whatsoever.
No, but I feel bad because I understand that for some people it can be very addictive, but I can't relate. Like, there's nothing about it that I find interesting.
You're much better off that way. I mean, that's why I pick YouTube as my platform for creating too. It's just like I from the sheer aspect of context, I can't. Again, I'm not a clinician, but I try really hard to be nuanced, and I try really hard to have an honest approach with things. And it's so difficult to do that with Instagram. I mean, every context just gets left out. And the same thing for consumption. You're consuming things without context.
And after today's video, I put a link down below for 50% off Creatine gummies. Yes, they're gummies, but they're sweetened with allulose. So this is a sweetener that doesn't spike your blood sugar or anything like that. But also they're 1.5 gram creatine gummies, which means you could low dose your creatine throughout the day. So you potentially don't have as much water retention, but you can also just go with a low dose. Like, for example, I find like 1 to 3 grams works great for brain function and for sleep, and maybe a little bit more for building muscle or for other certain goals. So that 50% off link is down below underneath this video. So check them out after today's video. They've got 4 different flavors that you can choose from, and a big thank you to them for supporting this channel.
So yes. The point being is that I'm not really aware of the cold plunge phenomenon.
Yeah, the cold plunge piece is, think, okay, well, I'm going to do something hard. I'm going to, have this hormetic stressor. When in reality, I mean, like Alan Aragon just, was talking recently about the paper that just came out saying that it potentially blunts muscle growth or hypertrophy. I use this as an example simply because...
By the way, I agree with that.
I agree too. I totally agree.
We did an AMA on this. I don't know if it's out yet, but it's been recorded. So we looked into this in excruciating detail. And I think the evidence is pretty good that it does indeed blunt hypertrophy. What wasn't clear is what the window is of that. Meaning, like, if you lifted this morning, it's pretty clear to me that if you jump in the cold plunge right after, you're blunting hypertrophy. Not clear if you do it at night or the next morning that it still is. I don't think I could elucidate from the data how long you need to separate the cold plunge from the session. Furthermore, cold plunge is not a uniform term. Like, at what temperature, in what duration? Totally. Like, there's a matrix of this.
No, absolutely. And I just use it as an example because there's a lot of throwing the word longevity around with it, right? This is a hormetic stressor. And the reason I use it is because this is something that still, although quelling inflammation and blunting the hypertrophic response, like, that's one thing, but also too much reactive oxygen species, like too much stress at one point. Like, if you take an athlete that's running 60 miles a week, 80 miles a week, is adding a cold plunge too much? I mean, sure, it's all relative to the individual. But again, the point is sometimes we look at these hormetic stressors, and although they build resilience and they're good, I mean, there's clearly a line. And we live in this world right now where we've got, with all due respect to him, I love the guy, like, Jocko and guys like that are just like, push harder, push harder, push harder, push harder. Personally, after having kids, like, I've had to check myself. Like, no, that's not what I want.
Yeah.
Like, I want resilience, but I want to live my life and I want to enjoy my kids. And if I look at going in a sauna at 220 degrees and then going in my cold plunge, I'm crafting my entire life around creating stress without adequate recovery. So, I mean, it's hard to say because it's again, very individual. Like, where do you draw the line? But I think it's an important discussion to have. Like, where does reactive oxygen species come into play? Like, when is it good? When is it bad?
No, it's the classic Goldilocks phenomenon, right? It's a not too much and a not too little, and I don't think we know the answer. So it is an inverted U. And unfortunately, many things, not all things, but many things in biology are the classic inverted U. Yeah. And this is clearly one of them, right? So, and it might not even just be the dose, it's also the clinical context, right? So what you might want when you have cancer could be entirely different from what you want to prevent cancer, right? So, the role of oxidative stress or ROS in cancer prevention could be very different from cancer treatment. Going back to what you said about the longevity component here, I have now looked we do this every couple of years. We'll go back and revisit our internal white papers on various topics. And the first time we did an internal white paper on cold immersion was late 2019 and early 2020. This was when I was kind of just getting ready to go out to Norway for that Limitless series. And obviously there was this, big component of cold exposure in that. And, we looked at all the literature that was available at the time and came to the conclusion that there was no longevity, meaning no lifespan benefit, didn't really get into health span, but no lifespan benefit from cold exposure, whereas there was a possible to probable lifespan benefit from heat exposure. We revisited that analysis now, 3 years later, so early 2023, and came to the same conclusion. We could not find any compelling evidence that cold exposure under any matrix criteria of frequency, temperature, and duration was actually geroprotective. Now, we did find evidence that it can reduce inflammation, which in the setting of training would translate to less DOMS.
Yeah.
And we did find evidence that it could improve mood and psychological well-being. And I think those things can be very important. But I just think people should be thoughtful about what it is they're buying.
Yeah.
In the sense of everything has an opportunity cost. And if someone says to me, I only have half an hour a day to devote to my health, I'm going to spend it all in a sauna and cold plunge and not exercise, I would say, let's revisit the strategy. I don't know that that's the highest ROI use of your time. Maybe we need to think more about portfolio allocation.
Yeah, I think we see that a lot. I think we see it's a low barrier to entry in a lot of ways to, cold plunge.
Well, it's passive, not active.
Yeah, you don't have to actually move.
Look, I've never met a person who wouldn't sign up for a 2-hour massage every single day. But very few people want to exercise 2 hours a day.
I love that.